Welcome back to the Be Ruthless Show. I'm your host, Sam Ruth, and joining me today is Dr. Chloe Carmichael, who is a clinical psychologist who prizes freedom of speech and independent thinking. She believes freedom of thought and speech are essential to mental health, as well as to the quality of media and academic research. As a clinical psychologist, Dr. Chloe is passionate about how free speech enhances mental health. Her book, Can I Say That?, explores the connection between open dialogue and emotional well being. Her interest in high functioning people naturally extends to politics, where the drive to support and engage with the community is a hallmark of growth and care beyond the self. I am so grateful to have you with us. Thank you so much for making time. I want to let everyone know that my eyes are killing me. I don't know if you can tell, but if they look funny or if I weird out, it is because they hurt and I cannot completely see. So thank you so much for being here. Tell us a little bit more about you and how writing became a part of your world.
Sure. Thanks, Sam. So as you mentioned, I'm a clinical psychologist, and writing was a part of my world long before I was a clinical psychologist. I can remember when I was 8 years old, I had this my parents had a cedar closet where I would lock myself in there. I had like a little lamp rigged, and I would write stories. I just loved to be in that cozy little space writing stories since I was really little. So I've just always loved to write. And then as I got older, I actually became a yoga teacher. And so I was a yoga teacher in my early 20s, which is actually what sparked a deeper interest in the mind and how the body mind connection works. So that led into clinical psychology, which I've been a clinical psychologist now for, gosh, probably close to 15, 20 years or so. And I still like yoga though, but don't practice as much as I used to. But always loved writing. So this is my third book that I just shared and published through Skyhorse Publishing. The book is called Can I Say That? Why Free Speech Matters and How to Use It Fearlessly. And I wrote that book because I think a lot of people are on eggshells because of cancel culture issues. And as a psychologist, but also kind of the yoga teacher too, like speaking is actually a bridge of the body mind connection. It's where we, obviously use our body to speak. And when we speak, we say, oh, I got that off my chest, or, it was on the tip of my tongue, like it's almost a body felt experience. And there's a lot to say there. So I'll take a pause, but that's who I am and how I got here.
So many people think a conversation equals conflict, or they'll
Mhm.
bite their tongue to avoid controversy. That's never been who I am. It's unhealthy. I will literally feel sick, get sick if I keep things in. But what do you feel about biting your tongue? Not even just being politically correct, but just
Mhm.
keeping things in when they're really on your mind.
Yeah, so I'm sure your audience is probably familiar with terms like repression, suppression, denial. And it's actually an interesting sequence we go through. So it starts with suppression, whereas you said a person is actively biting their tongue, telling themselves, don't say that. But then suppression, if we do it often enough, develops to repression, where it wouldn't even occur to us to say something. And then if we do that long enough, we can lapse into denial, which is, where we dissociate even from our own awareness that, something is wrong, or, it happens with victims of abuse a lot, where they just start accepting this twilight zone version of reality that almost seems normal to them until one day, hopefully, somebody helps them to snap out of it. And they're like, yeah, I knew all along that wasn't right. But somehow in the moment, it was like I was in denial. And we set ourselves up for denial, which obviously is also a stage of grief. When we don't talk. And that's one reason actually why when bereavement, people in bereavement are coming out of denial, one of the biggest things that they need to do is talk, is to tell stories about the person that they lost. Through verbalizing is our bridge really to coming to terms with reality, to understanding reality and connecting with others about reality through speech. It's this amazing tool. It's like breathing. When I was a yoga teacher, I was explaining to people all the time that breathing is this big, huge, elegant thing that we're doing that's like a miraculous thing that we don't even realize because we're doing it automatically in the background all the time. Same thing could be said of speech in a way. We almost forget all the incredible things that speech does for us because we just do it so naturally.
So funny that you said that about breathing. I now pay attention, but when I'm stressed or in situations, I would have to remind myself to breathe. My shoulders would get tense and I would catch myself and be like, "Oh my goodness, like when's the last time you were breathing?" It's that
Mhm.
reflex that we go into, and people with different personalities, there are those who just clam up, those who nervously chatter, and I never compared it to breathing in that way.
Yeah, it's amazing. They're like these innate bodily functions, that we're just wired to do. We actually have unique regions of our brain that are specifically devoted to separately to the production and separately to the comprehension of language. And the fact that there are specific parts of the brain that are just for those things. It's almost like the way that having lungs demonstrates that we need to breathe. We're like literally born to do it. It's built into us. The same thing is true of language. And even it's so interesting with babies. Babies, infants, right out of the womb, they will orient and pay special attention to the sound of human voices more than, other random noises. It's just hardwired into us to understand that speech is really essential to our well-being. It helps us cognitively, emotionally, and of course, socially.
You said something earlier, I don't remember exactly what it was, but I'm working with a 16-year-old and friends, boyfriends, dating, you can get isolated and not have those other conversation, those other voices to chime in and help you see things differently. And so unhealthy relationships, even friendships, can become dangerous. So we were having a conversation and I was saying a different point of view than one that had been heard, and it was, I was she was looking at me like it was foreign language, like I I was saying something that had just never occurred to her. But when you separate yourself, when you remove yourself from people, from connections, and you only have certain points of view, those languages, those other frames of reference do become foreign. And so it's so important to hear, to see conversations. And so whether it is being isolated, whether it is being shy, whether it is being afraid that a conversation is a conflict, um, people can remove themselves from opportunities, um, information.
Mhm. And perspectives, So that's one of the things too, the book is called Can I Say That? And one would think, well, it's about speaking up. To a certain degree it is. But what it's also about is the importance of letting other people speak up too, even if it's something that we disagree with. This whole thing of, words are violence or silence is violence, all these things, I think has caused conversations to feel like landmine topics. And people are truly afraid of, somebody who voted differently than they did, or somebody who sees, social issues differently than they do. There's this, I think, almost like a phobia of saying, well, this person is hateful and I could be contaminated. you know, and it's hard because I really think that people are coming from a good place. I share some stories in the book about, for example, like an anonymized client story about someone that came. He was suffering from depression, and which, as you know, isolation is one of the hallmark symptoms often of depression, people who are isolating themselves. And what he was doing is he was systematically canceling all the people in his life, because they had the wrong view on this or the wrong view on that, this whole going no contact thing. And he thought he was doing something virtuous. He thought he was doing the hard work that had to be done. So he wasn't trying, to hurt himself or to hurt others. But he was boxing himself into loneliness and into a corner, over, differences about people who thought differently about abortion or people who thought differently about immigration or whatever, instead of recognizing that there could be a diversity of opinions. And that's just something I really want people to appreciate and to understand. And we don't all have to agree. I think it would be weird if we all did agree, but I just want people to understand that it's important to speak up. And it's also important to let other people speak up and to know that we can be safe. We can truly be safe, even if that happens. Like a truly safe space is one where we can have a diversity of opinions. Now, interestingly, I have to say, because I know you run grief groups and things like that. And so I have been asked before, like, well, what about like in a therapeutic group? What about having restrictions on what can be said in a place like that? And I just want to say, I totally get that. Like, if you're in a grief group, I could understand, having certain rules like that we don't discuss certain topics. And also, the point that I'm trying to make is not either to say that we shouldn't have tact or healthy self-restraint. Like, there is a section in the book on the difference between self-censorship, which is that real repression of yourself or others, versus healthy self-restraint, which is just not having to blurt out everything that we think all the time. So I just want to be clear, I'm not saying no filter, but I am just trying to say that it's helpful to kind of go there sometimes in conversations, to let ourselves be exposed to people and ideas that just think differently, and to be able to tolerate that will be stronger and will actually learn more.
I love your example. I have a extremely intelligent, articulate college student who has a plan and thinks it's the only plan, and was a little bit closed-minded to some input that was not part of what was in the plan, and um was not letting information in that they thought would fit, and started to cut off some relationships that were helpful, that was information that could be an and, not an either or, maybe an
Mhm.
and.
Mhm.
And so finding ways to listen, receive feedback, understand that people are coming from places that all have different perspectives and different experiences and different information, and it doesn't have to be anything other than information, that you can be curious and listen. And it ended up being really beneficial, but it was so, at first, automatically like, no, I already have everything I need, I've got a plan, I and a very good plan. And
Mhm.
sometimes we can be driven and live according to our own schedules and not see things that can help us get there.
Yeah, and speaking of not seeing things, what's interesting too is that when we feel in any way charged or threatened in a conversation, which, again, can happen even when there's no need to feel that way. Again, like we're just talking to somebody that maybe has a different opinion about social issues or something. Um, when our heart rate goes above 100 beats per minute, we're literally just not even processing clearly on a cognitive level. This is why people have to practice fire drill exit plans, because when there's like a fire going on, they can't even remember how to leave the building, right? And I think that the world of, you know, has sometimes become so charged and landmine-ish that people have that, you know, there's a fire feeling going on, either because they have a fear of people who think differently than they do, or they're conditioned to the idea that other people are going to crucify them because, you know, of their views or their opinions. And as you mentioned during my introduction, I really work mainly with pretty much exclusively with what's called high functioning people. And I imagine you probably do too. Your audience may not even know it, but they're high functioning. Like in the world of psychology, if you can set an alarm clock and be somewhere on time and, you know, hold down a job and you have a, you know, few supportive relationships that you maintain and all that kind of stuff, in psychology world, that's actually considered like you're a high functioning person, that you can meet your own needs as well as help others a little bit with their needs too. You know, that's actually functioning at a high level. And people that are high functioning tend to have an interest in the world around them. They go beyond just thinking about their own basic food, clothing, and shelter needs. And so, with that said, that's why the idea of saying, well, we're just not ever going to talk about politics is almost not practical for people, because at the root of the word, all politics means is public life. And so people who have an interest in the community around them, whether it be about education or, you know, what to do about crime issues, or, you know, how we want our tax dollars to be spent, or, you know, just any social standards, people that have interest in society, which again is a good thing, they're going to have interest by definition, even if they don't think of themselves as political. They're going to have interests in that, in social issues. And so I just think people have become so anxious about being canceled about this kind of stuff, or they're, you know, anxious because they're canceling other people. And as a psychologist, I just want people to understand that freedom of expression is a good thing. And even if we're talking to people that we disagree with, we'll actually, first of all, also have a better chance of potentially persuading them through open dialogue than, you know, by telling them to shut up, right? Like we can't, you know, silence people and think that that's going to even change their views. But even if we don't want to change their views, I just want people to learn how to be in contact. I saw some really alarming statistics about people, you know, cutting out family members. And then of course we're already in an epidemic of loneliness. And I don't think we need to do anything to cut ourselves off even further.
What do you think about the world we live in, where people immediately turn to discussing things on social media or engaging and involving others that are not really in their lives, but it soon becomes public?
You mean like social media spats about stuff? Yeah. So, I mean, I have mixed feelings about that. Like I think certainly for many people, it's totally not productive. And it's really better to have those conversations in real life where we can have more empathy because we see a person's facial expression and we hear the tone in their voice. And there's a sense of accountability that I think helps people to keep themselves in check a little bit. Like one of the techniques I talk about in the book, in fact, is that if you are in a conversation with somebody and you feel it's getting a little more heated than you would like it to, including on your own part, to imagine that there's, you know, a video of this conversation and the video is going to be played. And what that does is it can activate people's sense of, you know, social awareness, which can help us to remember to adhere to social norms and remember the way that we want to be seen and known in the community. So there is a lot to be said for that. However, just to be the devil's advocate, um, I think sometimes people enjoy interacting online about politics because it gives them a format to try out opinions, to say things or discuss things or interact with people that they might not even come across in their day-to-day life. But I will acknowledge that unfortunately it often does spiral, or devolve into, like, certainly if it ever gets to the point of name calling, or, people are just putting a GIF in the comments at somebody, like it just starts to feel like it's not really a dialogue. That's not helpful. But I have seen a few good examples where sometimes people have been able to have productive online dialogue.
I just feel like I could say the sky is blue, and people would argue at this point
Fair.
in an unhealthy manner,
True.
in online, when they could in person in a conversation as well. But it's becoming a forum where, I'm trying to let people know it's Black Balloon Day, and let's raise some awareness for anyone who has lost someone to overdose, not argue about it. So
Mhm.
to have those conversations in a way that doesn't create controversy, because we don't, we might be talking to each other and we know each other, but other people from anywhere will chime in,
Totally.
inevitably.
Yeah, and I do think it's important to have good boundaries. So when I say that I'm advocating for open dialogue and freedom of expression, um, that doesn't mean, again, that I think that we should have no filter. And I also don't think it means that we have to lend our ears to everybody. So, there's nothing wrong with using the mute or the block button online. I mean, especially if these are people you don't even know and they're just, aggravating you, like, no need to go there. I guess when I wrote the book, I was thinking more about, again, family members that are losing their family relationships, or university students that feel like they have to pantomime that they agree with a professor, or because they're afraid to be authentic. It's just been so interesting that at the same time we've had this big rise in cancel culture, Google searches for the phrase "be authentic" have quadrupled. So, on the one hand, people are terrified of saying the wrong thing, and it feels like the list of what's, politically correct to say gets updated every week. And then deep down, people are just craving authenticity. And it feels like those two things are in competition sometimes.
I have always worn my heart on my sleeve, came on here and said, I feel like my eyes look as bad as they feel. But we live in this world that says fake it until you make it, right? And that doesn't work for me. So whether it is my best friend or the person I'm running across at the gas station, if someone says, how are you? I'm not saying fine when I'm not fine. I'm going to say, I didn't sleep great. I'm not going to tell the person I'm running across that's a stranger my life story, but I'm not faking it until I make it. It just doesn't work for me. So going back to, can I say that, right? Like, I say some element of the truth to whoever that person is. So I would love to live in that world where um everyone gives an authentic answer to some degree, even if it's not the entire, like, I don't feel safe enough to tell the whole truth to the stranger. I'm not saying I'm fine when I'm not.
That's so, so good that you have that instinctual habit, because s I mean, part of the thing I learned in the book too is, like, a lot of psychology is researching and documenting and proving the obvious, right? So, this sounds obvious, but it was interesting still to read about the study showing it, that when people verbalize and talk about problems, they will come up with more solutions to the problems, as well as more high quality and creative solutions to the problems than when they have to figure out the problem by themselves without any dialogue with anybody else, which is so interesting, right? Because as you said, if somebody says, "How are you?" or whatever, and you start telling them even a little bit of the truth, well, maybe they'll throw something back at you that, could be helpful, or even just that moment of connection and empathy with somebody actually drops your cortisol levels too, is another thing that I learned about, that we experience what's called neural coupling, where, just when you're having a heart to heart with somebody, your brain waves actually, the old saying, like we're on the same wavelength. Those brain waves literally do start to sync up, and that gives us this feeling of security because we are tribal animals. We feel safer and more calm when we're in connection with a community, and verbalizing is really a bridge to do that. So it helps us to solve problems, which decreases anxiety, and it decreases our sense of helplessness, and helplessness is another hallmark of depression. So again, the psycholinguist Steven Pinker actually said something that I thought was so hit the nail on the head about this. He said, humans need to speak the way that spiders need to spin webs. And I thought that was just so true, because I don't know if you've ever tried this, but I've been to some yoga retreats where you do silent retreats for, like, a day or two or whatever. And it's good. I'm not saying we should never take a break. It was actually very helpful and illuminating. But try not speaking, for 24 hours. And it really gives you an awareness of all these incredible things that speech is doing for us that we don't even realize.
I love that. Yes. I have never done one for that long. Um, but I even just living with just dogs, I talk to my dogs, I talk to myself, I talk to my husband who's not here anymore with us. So
Well, journaling too, which is another thing I encourage people to do. Like if, suppose that you're in a situation where you cannot verbalize because you would get in trouble, so to speak. Like suppose that you're at work and they put out some ridiculous new HR policy, and, you have a real problem with it, but for whatever reason, you can't speak openly about it. I really encourage people to, at the very least, journal and write it down as you do, whether it be talk to your dog or whatever, because even if we're not talking to another person who hears us, which is really ideal, the gift of language is so important that, journaling, of course, has been shown as well to just help us organize our thoughts and to build our awareness of our thoughts. Uh, Speaking, it's so interesting. Again, we just don't even think about it, but it forces us to put this kind of wild, unformed internal experience swirl of thoughts and feelings into a coherent system of language. We start using if then statements and because when statements. And what that does is it organizes us and it helps us to prepare ourselves for action and to sort through what's really going on with us. So even if you're talking to your dog, it's actually so much better than stewing in silence, even though silence has its time and place, but language is really key.
I'm curious about this. So, as authors, I use pen to paper. I don't use my computer. But I also will send myself audio notes. So it's impossible for me to just write. There's so many different ways I have notes for myself, sticky notes. So speaking as part of writing is a part of my process.
Yeah, I mean, that's wonderful. And in fact, with mindfulness meditation, which in fact, mindfulness-based stress reduction, which is really just a formalized system of, the mindfulness that Eastern cultures have been practicing for thousands of years, and, mindfulness-based stress reduction is now, at Harvard and Johns Hopkins and all these places, it's documented to help people to not only reduce stress, but to be more effective. And an absolutely essential ingredient of mindfulness, if you're going to truly do it properly, is that you not only observe your thoughts, but you must speak them or write them, you convey them, you describe them, to somebody else. And what that does is it builds what we call your meta awareness, your ability to think about your thoughts, because you can examine them when you hear yourself speak. Right? We've all had the experience of saying something, and then we go, "Well, gee, as I say that aloud, maybe that doesn't sound right." Right? Or we review our own writing and we say, "Ah, I see these two things connect," or whatever it is. So verbalizing increases our awareness of what we're thinking, as well as our ability to critique it or to develop it.
I love all of this. I could talk to you for days. Talk a little bit about your other 2 books.
Sure. So, Can I Say That? Why Free Speech Matters and How to Use It Fearlessly is the current book. And then before that, I had a book called Nervous Energy: Harness the Power of Your Anxiety. It was published in 5 languages. That's the, I believe, Japanese version behind me. I'm not exactly sure. It was published in Complex Chinese, Simplified Chinese, and I think Japanese. So I'm not sure which one that one is, but it was also in Russian and in Turkish, as well as, of course, in English. And all the books are available in audiobook, which I love as well. But Nervous Energy, Harness the Power of Your Anxiety, is about the healthy function of anxiety, which is to stimulate preparation behaviors. So both Nervous Energy and Can I Say That follow the same format, which is that part one is the psychology of the topic, explaining the research and the why of like what this is and why it matters. And then part two of the book is all techniques. So part two of Nervous Energy is techniques to help unlock the healthy function of anxiety, to kind of tap into it in a constructive way. And then part two of Can I Say That is techniques not only for speaking up, but also for learning and remaining how to listen, since that is truly how we'll have the best dialogue. It can't just be about us speaking up, it has to also be about constructive listening. And then my very first book is called Dr. Chloe's 10 Commandments of Dating. And as the name implies, that one is 10 rules and topics for people that are specifically seeking a long-term committed monogamous relationship, likely in some kind of marital sense, whether or not they want to formally get married or not.
Where can people get these books?
Yeah, so all of my books are available on Amazon, but the last 2 books, Can I Say That and Nervous Energy, are also available at like Walmart and, Target and all the places. But the dating book is just on Amazon. But all of the books are available as audiobooks, which I love because I love to take walks and things like that, or, be around my house doing laundry. And I love to just be able to listen to stuff while I'm doing that. So people can come to drchloe.com, drchloe.com, and then they'll have links to all my books, or you can just go to Amazon and punch in Chloe Carmichael and my books will pop up.
Do the audiobooks still have the second section the way you described?
Yeah, they do. They do. And in fact, I believe you can also get a PDF with them that has worksheets, because there's also worksheets and things like that. But if anybody gets the audiobooks and doesn't get worksheets, feel free to come to my website and contact me and I'll send them to you.
I have a client I'm thinking of right now who I know is listening or will listen and will get at least 2 of these. What if they then say, "Dr. Chloe is amazing. How can I connect with her?"
Well, social media, I do connect with people through social media. I'm not really doing individual visits right now, just because between the books and the speaking, and then I have a son that I'm homeschooling. And so my one-to-one energy is a little bit tapped out. But if people do just have questions or comments, social media is a good place to share, or you can, send me stuff through my website. There's a contact form, and sometimes I do social media Ask Dr. Chloe sessions where like I'll read the questions people ask me and then answer them on the air, but I don't do those super frequently.
You're not saying it, but I do know reviews are really important on your website or on Amazon. Where is the best place?
Oh, thank you so much for mentioning that. You are so correct. Reviews on Amazon are honestly like gold to me. So, like, if somebody does a nice review for my book and sends me a screenshot of it, I have a special gift for you. I really do. I actually do. So because yeah, it's like the one thing I cannot like do or purchase myself, like just authentic reviews on Amazon help other people to see the message, because the more people that are reviewing the book, the more Amazon says, oh, people are interested in this. And so that's like, if my work has been helpful to you and you want to do something nice for me, the best thing is to leave me a nice review.
What am I not asking that we need to talk about?
Well, gosh, Sam, I think that you've honestly asked just about everything. I love this has been so thorough, and I really appreciate that you shared just your own experiences with speech and language and what it's been like for you. I always love hearing about that from other people.
Thank you. To anyone listening who is a little bit like me, a little bit more blunt, a little bit rough around the edges, who doesn't always say things so pretty, I have learned to embrace that, right? There's other people who I'll say, oh, that's what I meant. It sounds so much prettier coming from you. We all are who we are, and you don't have to be anyone else. I don't know if you touch on that anywhere in the book, but there's no one else like me out there. There's no one else like you. And someone else does say things in a prettier rainbow, way than I do. But that doesn't mean I should bite my tongue and not say something. So there's all different ways to speak, but biting my tongue really truly means I will end up sick. Keeping it in is not healthy. What did you like? Speaking is, what did you say? It is like you
It's
said.
like breathing, or it's like spiders need to spin
Yeah.
webs. But I will say for people that and it's interesting because when you bottle stuff up a lot for people who do that, and I was doing that a fair amount myself. I share some of my own experiences in the book. And then when you first decide to speak up, it can come out a little bit in fits and starts sometimes. And I do find for me, the more I speak up, the more smoothly I'm able to do it. But I also encourage people, if they are nervous about saying something in a certain way, and they want to say something in a way that it's going to be well received, um, and they want to work on their wording, a few things that they can do would be either to write out your thoughts in advance and kind of give yourself a chance to be with that material, so it's not the first time you're forming the words when you're in that live dialogue moment, or to consider a role play with a friend where you say your piece and see how they respond, and then switch roles. Sometimes it's interesting too to see how somebody that you admire says the thing. Like, again, not that we have to change ourselves, but for some of us, we say, gee, I'd like to learn how to say such and such in a way that is going to be better received. And that is a skill if people want to learn how to do it. But of course, some people can go too far to the point where they're not even being authentic. So it is an art.
Yes, I love both of those. Writing, practicing. I didn't even look if there are questions in the comments. Send to drchloe.com, social media. Final thoughts.
No, I just want to thank you for having me. Ironically, it's like because the issue of freedom of expression is kind of loaded for people right now. I know that it's not even always a comfortable thing to like talk about, which is why I felt the need to write the book, to almost do a public service announcement. So I really appreciate that you let me come on and share the message. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much again for being here, for your time, for everything you do. Until next time, everyone, always be ruthless.